All right, we are on the third week. It is April 30th that you should be doing this, and this is Life of a Civil War Soldier if you find this folder on social studies. I am going to read, there's a couple different parts I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read the Duxter's page first. It says American Civil War, Life as a Soldier During the Civil War. The life as a soldier during the Civil War wasn't easy. Not only did the soldiers face the possibility of getting killed in the battle, their daily lives were full of hardships. They had to deal with hunger, bad weather, poor clothing, and even boredom between battles. A typical day in the life of a soldier. Soldiers were woken at dawn to begin their day. They had drills in the morning and afternoon where they practiced for battle. Each soldier had to know his place in the unit so the army could fight as a group. Fighting together and quickly obeying the commands of the officers was key to victory. Between their drills, soldiers would do chores such as cooking their meals, fixing their uniforms, or cleaning equipment. If they had some free time, they might play games such as poker or dominoes. They also enjoyed singing songs, writing letters home at night. Some soldiers would have a guard duty. This can make for a long and tiring day. Medical conditions. The soldiers of the Civil War had to deal with terrible medical conditions. Doctors didn't know about infections. They didn't even bother to wash their hands. Many soldiers died from infections and diseases. Even a small wound could end up infected and cause a soldier to die. The idea of medicine during this time was very primitive. They had little knowledge of painkillers. During major battles, there were far more wounded soldiers than doctors. There was little doctors could do for wounds to the torso, but for wounds to the arm and leg, they would often amputate, which means just cut it off. How old were they? They were soldiers of all ages that fought during the war. The average for a Union Army was around 25 years old. The minimum age to join the Army was 18 years old. However, it thought that many young boys lied about their age, and by the end of the war, there were thousands of soldiers as young as 15. What did they eat? The soldiers of the Civil War were often hungry. They mostly ate hard crackers made from flour, water, and salt called hardtack. We've heard of that. Sometimes they would get salt pork or cornmeal to eat. To supplement their meals, soldiers would forage from the land around them. They would hunt game and collect fruits, berries, and nuts wherever they could. By the end of the war, many soldiers in the Confederate Army were on the verge of starvation. Were they paid? A private in the Union Army made $13 a month, while a 3-star general made over $700 a month. Soldiers in the Confederate Army made less, with privates' earnings $11 a month. Payments were slow and irregular, however, with soldiers sometimes waiting over 6 months to get paid. Facts about life as a soldier during the Civil War. During the fall, they would work on their winter camp where they would stay at one place for a long winter months. Soldiers were drafted, but the rich could make a payment if they wanted to avoid fighting. If life as a soldier was bad, life as a prisoner was worse. Conditions were so bad that thousands of soldiers died while being held as prisoners. By the end of the war, around 10% of the Union Army consisted of African American soldiers. So remember, we kind of talked before about them being able to fight in the Civil War. Let's see. Alright, the next one I'm going to read is the Civil War uniforms. It's on a Duxter's page as well. Alright, as you can imagine, in a battle between tens of thousands of men, things can get confusing. It even becomes difficult to know which soldier is on which side. The main way to tell the difference is by their uniform. And here are pictures of the uniform. You've probably heard of the blue and the gray when people refer to the Civil War sides. The Northern Union armies wore navy blue, and the Southern Confederate armies wore gray. However, the uniforms weren't exactly uniform at the start of the war. At the start of the war, when the Civil War first began, neither side thought it would turn into a major conflict. They weren't ready for a major war against each other. One of the things they weren't ready for was having uniforms for the armies. At first, uniforms were provided to the soldiers by the states and local cities. The materials and colors and styles were all different. The North tried to get their soldiers to all wear navy blue uniforms, but they often ran out of blue cloth and had to use gray. The materials and styles were different too, depending on where a soldier came from. Confusion on the battlefield. The lack of consistent uniforms led to the confusion on the battlefield. In some early battles, soldiers often shot people from their own side. Eventually, the uniforms became more standard, with the Union Army wearing navy-colored uniforms and the Confederate wearing gray. The Union uniform consisted of a dark blue wool coat with a light blue trousers and a dark cap called a forage cap. They typically wore shoes that went up to their ankles called brogans. The coat often had bright buttons that sometimes indicated the rank of a soldier or what the state they represented. Other markings on the coat, like piping or badges, usually indicated the rank of the soldier. There's another picture. The Confederate uniforms were less standard than the Union's. At the start of the war, many Confederate soldiers just wore their own clothes into battle. Eventually, they settled on a uniform that had a waist-length gray coat and light blue trousers. Due to the cost of materials during the war, many Confederate soldiers did not have adequate uniforms. They often wore combinations of what they could find and steal, as well as their own clothes. They also didn't have very good shoes, and sometimes they would go without shoes at all. The typical soldier had a musket or rifle, and possibly a knife or a sword for close combat. Some rifles had bayonets at the end, and they were used for close combat. Officers often had pistols and a sword to fight with. Other gear. Soldiers carried their own gear in a backpack called a knapsack. They carried a blanket, a frying pan for cooking, a canteen for water. Other items also included a comb, a sewing kit, or to repair their uniform, silverware, a Bible, and a pocket knife. Alright, and after you do that, there is another page that I'm not going to read to you, but it is a recipe for hardtack, and that is one of the options of your activity that you can do. You can make the hardtack, and then you can send me a picture of your hardtack through email or Schoology. If you don't want to do that, Activity 2 focuses on the uniform, and Activity 1 is writing a letter home like you were a soldier during the Civil War.